Hi, everybody. Welcome to the WVHuddle.com Prep Football Podcast. Gentlemen, it's the most wonderful time of the year. It's playoff time is upon us in West Virginia. Of course, we're recording here live at Adelphia Sports Bar and Grill, 218 Capitol Street in the heart of downtown Charleston. All kinds of holiday catering opportunities coming up. Come in, eat here, have a banquet, get some to go, but get some definitely because the food is really good. Again, I'm on that grilled cheese and gyro meat sandwich, so if you want the grilled cheese gyro meat sandwich, I highly recommend it. But back to the high school football playoffs. We'll just jump right in. We're going to start with first round, of course, Class AAA. Looking at these matchups, top half of the bracket, number 16 seed ends up being Princeton. They take on number 1 Cabell Midland on Friday. The number 9-8 game is number 9 Brook versus number 8 Morgantown. That's a rematch. That game's also on Friday. Number 13 Spring Mills takes on number 4 Capital on Saturday at University of Charleston Stadium here in Charleston. And rounding out the top half of the AAA bracket, number 12 Greenbrier East takes on number 5 Martinsburg. In the bottom half, it's number 15 Musselman versus number 2 Point Pleasant on Friday. Number 10 GW versus number 7 Huntington also on Friday. Number 14 Spring Valley goes to Wheeling Park on Saturday afternoon. That's the evening game, right? Spring Valley, Wheeling Park is Saturday night. Yes.
Saturday night, yeah.
Yes, and rounding out the Class AAA playoff bracket for 2015, number 11 South Charleston, long trip out to the Eastern Panhandle to take on Jefferson. And guys, this is a pretty stacked field. I think Cabell Midland is a pretty clear favorite, but a lot of good matchups here in the first round, and it's kind of hard not to look ahead at some of the potential ones down the road. But just with what we have going on this weekend, what games are jumping out at you guys? Rick, we can start with you. Yeah,
I'm just looking, like I mentioned to Derek a few minutes ago, at 4 Eastern Panhandle teams, and he said that there's never been more than 2. So definitely an EP flavor as we start. Definitely a lot of MSAC teams in here too. But for selfish sake, I think Huntington GW kind of stands out to me. They've met. Obviously, they're familiar with each other in the same conference. They played 2 years ago in the quarterfinals, and it's kind of, you could look at it, boil it down to GW's offense and Huntington's defense. Huntington's been playing top-notch defense for several years, and GW is averaging about 50 points a game, and not too many teams have slowed them down.
You know, you made a good point. I mean, you could really make a case for any of these matchups, being interesting. I think they all are. I'm interested to see what Lawson does at Martinsburg. I think that's
Xavier Lawson, the running back from Greenbrier East.
Correct. But the one that really stands out to me is South Charleston at Jefferson.
Okay.
I mean, the draw South Charleston got, I think we talked about, wasn't the worst draw they could have got.
No.
That's a long trip, and Jefferson's a good team, but South Charleston's proven just last year that they can take a lower seed and run all the way with it. So I want to see, coming off the big win over GW, how that momentum carries them up there.
Derek, you were at that GW game. South Charleston's getting right at the right time of year, aren't they? Crozier's back. They've had Pitts back for a little while now, and CJ Perkins, he had an article earlier this week, has really emerged as a legitimate power running threat for South Charleston. That's something they haven't had for several years now.
Not really since the Tyler Harris and Aaron Slusher combo of 08.
Right.
Donnie Mays talks about the similarities between Perkins and Harris as a runner, but it's hard for me to think about that with Tyler Harris being the quarterback. Okay, so I go with a comparison to Slusher, the fullback as tailback kind of guy, and CJ runs a lot like he did to my memory. The first round matchup I'm looking at a lot is the 8-9, the Brook at Morgantown. I mean, Morgantown beat Brook, I think, by 13 in week 2, and since then Brook is 7-1 with its only loss being to Steubenville, Ohio. Not a bad loss. And look,
including a win over Wheeling Park.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So before we hand the Lombardi Trophy to Wheeling Park, let's remember Brook beat them.
Wheeling Park won the Super Bowl. Because that's what the Lombardi Trophy's for.
I know. I know what I'm talking about.
I don't, so I just like to make sure.
But no, look. I like John Bowers, at Morgantown's coach. And he was saying how this team reminds him a lot of his own 08 team, which kind of had a lot of youth in 07. That team barely made the playoffs. Only made the playoffs because Martinsburg had to hand them a forfeit. And, those guys came back and they made it to the semis when South Charleston beat them at Lately. At the same time, I look at their stats and everything, and Ryan, you've seen them. You know that they've gone through some injuries and everything, but nothing jumps off the page to me from Morgantown. And none of their wins really jump off the page to me. I like Brooke in that game.
I was going to bring that game up because, there's a lot of layers to that. Bowers is a Brooke graduate, played on those really good Brooke teams in the 80s.
92 he graduated.
Yeah, 80s, 90s. Bowers would be mad about that. Dating him a little, giving him a few extra years.
He was there in the 80s.
Well, remember also that Morgantown team without its quarterback was a blocked field goal from winning at Martinsburg.
Exactly. So I really
makes
don't
me
know
worry
what to
about
make.
Martinsburg a little bit against East because East is kind of rolling right now.
Yeah.
That 39-8 win they had over Princeton a couple weeks ago, that was a decent Princeton team, and that wasn't close.
A team we haven't really gotten into, Capital. It seems odd that the playoffs are getting going in AAA, and it seems like nobody's really talking about Capital. That's the team that went 14-0 last year, won the Class AAA title, kind of brought that reign of championships Martinsburg had been rattling off to an end. But you lose a couple games in the regular season this year to Cabell Midland and then up at GW, and all of a sudden Capital seems like maybe they're off the radar a little bit. Is that kind of the perception you've been getting? Because you just don't hear a whole lot about Capital going into this year's playoffs.
I talked to John Carpenter Sunday, and he told me, he goes, well, this isn't the way we saw it going. It's, definitely not the year that we thought that we would enjoy. And he, John blames himself for it. In his own words, I'll paraphrase. He said, I've spent too much time trying to, cure society of social ills and too little time being a football coach. And, and that's John. I think they'll find a way to get focused and rediscover their identity. I don't know that that's going to carry them to a repeat title. Interestingly enough, the last school to win a AAA title and not win it again was Parkersburg South in 03. It's been that long since we haven't had back-to-backs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We had Morgantown right after that, then Parkersburg, then South Charleston, then Martinsburg, and now Capital.
An interesting little fact there. I didn't know that. We'll stop with Class AAA there, go into Class AA. Matchups, first round, number 16 Independence at number 1 Bridgeport on Friday. That's a rough draw for Independence as the 16 seed. 8-9 game I think is a pretty interesting one. I'm sure we'll get into it in just a little bit. Number 9 Robert C. Byrd travels to play Chapmanville, the number 8 seed, on Saturday. Number 13 Lincoln versus number 4 Fairmont Senior. That's a kind of proximity conference rivalry thing. That could end up being a pretty good game. At number 12 Westside takes on number 5 Kaiser on Saturday. In the bottom half of the Class AA bracket, number 15 Weird travels to number 2 Bluefield on Saturday, and that game will be at Mitchell Stadium. I think originally there was a conflict with the Bluefield College playoff game that was there, but the game was originally going to be at Princeton, but it's at Mitchell Stadium, correct?
Correct.
Just making sure we got that one right. Next game in Class AA, number 10 Summers County versus number 7 Mingo Central, and we will certainly get into the Mingo Central situation here in just a little bit.
Mingo Central situation?
As much as we can. Anyway. At number 14 in Class AA, Liberty from Raleigh County takes on number 3 Tulsa. That game is a Friday game. And last game in AA, number 11 Herbert Hoover back in the playoffs for the first time. I want to say, was it 2010 the last?
2010.
2010 was Herbert Hoover's last appearance. They went article today, I believe, written by Rick, was Herbert Hoover got in 2009 and 2010. Tim Meyer's first 2 years.
Yeah, first
haven't
2 years.
haven't been back since. The Huskies, interesting game. I believe it's one you're covering on Friday at number 6 James Monroe.
I'm looking forward to that.
All right,
Really.
before we get into any of the individual matchups, I think we have to address the Mingo Central situation and what happened last Friday night. Miners take on Westside in the last game of the regular season at Westside, and by all accounts, a lot of the regulars from Mingo Central starting lineup didn't play in that game. And correct me if I'm mixing up anything here. And the reasoning was that there were some guys that were banged up, maybe a little hurt, and you're getting them right before you go into the playoffs. But it wasn't just 1 or 2 guys, though. It was I believe, as I've heard, as many as 15 regulars from the Mingo Central team didn't play. Westside wins that game in a walkover against Mingo Central, and it throws the Class AA field kind of into flux. The Miners go from being in the top half of the home teams in Class AA down to a number 7 seed. Westside gets in. North Marion's held out. You know, there was a lot of moving pieces on Friday night and Saturday as this started to come down. And, you know, on the surface, if you read Twitter and Facebook and message boards or listen to our voicemails at work or anything like that, then there's a lot of people that are just going to come out and say, oh, Mingo Central cheated. Oh, they threw the game. You can't prove that. No. I mean, it doesn't look good. There's no denying that it's not a good look for the Miners and Yogi Kender, the coach down there, but you know, you play the hand you're dealt. You can not like it, you can be mad about it, but there's not really anything you can do about it now. The SSAC is not going to come down with any heavy-handed sanctions or anything like that on them. You just kind of got to get over it and move on at this point. That's how I see it. I mean, you guys are certainly entitled to your own opinions on the matter. I mean, you were at the playoff meeting on Sunday. What were you hearing, if anything, about what all went on with Mingo Central last weekend?
Surprisingly little. Honestly, I think people in that coaching fraternity will say stuff off the record about it or whatever, and that's even if they care to comment. But you know, on the record, they're not gonna. It's not gonna. I mean, look. I mean, it affected a lot of people. You know, it moved Kaiser into Bridgeport's bracket as a result of them not beating Westside.
Moved Bird into Bridgeport's bracket as well.
Yeah, you know, and I didn't talk to Brian Fisher, but I heard Sean Beiser from Kaiser. It rhymes. I'm sorry. You know, wasn't too thrilled. You know, in single A, Buffalo ended up with the 6th seed instead of the 5 because Man, which beat Westside earlier in the year, got a bonus point and jumped ahead of them. You know, it had ripples all over the place. But if you look at it in a vacuum, you know, and through a utilitarian point of view, where the ends justify the means, Yogi Kender was every bit in his right to do what he did. You know, but you know, he's looking out for self-preservation. He's looking out for the best interest of his team. But you have to consider, or you don't, what it does to other people, what your, you know, ideologies, what your actions do to other people. And yeah, he didn't win any fans, except maybe diehard utilitarians, I suppose. But
the folks at Westside.
The folks at Westside probably like him a little bit. But the thing is, even though we're discussing it, and I think it deserves discussed, I think the reactions from people who don't have a dog in a fight are way over the top. You know, it's not Watergate, it's not the Iran-Contra, it's a high school football coach looking out for the best interest of his team and his community at the expense of anybody else. And we get into talking about like the mentality of victory and the mentality of sports and do everything. I think what you get is when you extrapolate it is you get exactly what he did. Okay, you know, he's the personification, Yogi. I mean, the personification of all that bluster and everything that people claim that sports is about, and trying to win and all of that. And that's what you get. That's what you create. You know, so there it is.
I was also at that playoff meeting and got to talk to Summers' coach for a minute, and his name escapes me, and I'm sorry about that, but they're definitely using that as motivation.
I figured.
So that's an interesting thing. I think we kind of talked, and the perception is whoever, if anyone beats Mingo, they're all of a sudden the heroes of the state, right, of a lot of people, and there are going to be a lot of teams. They're going to. It's the playoffs. You're going to take every team's best shot, but there's definitely some additional motivation factor there for whoever they play, and that's something to consider too.
I think the fact that he rested some players at the end of the season, you know, NFL teams do that every year, and it affects other teams' playoff bids coming down, and that's not held against them. Now, we all know Deontay Joplin has missed the 2 previous games to that because of an injury. Stevie Hammond didn't even run the ball one game because he's been banged up. Yeah. And I know Stephen Witt, their top receiver, has been banged up. But that's 3 guys there, 3 important guys, and like we said, we've heard anywhere from 10 to 15 regulars were held out. So, I kind of have my doubts if all 10 or 15 of those guys were needing a break. But I think maybe over top of that is, Yogi kidded with Derek a couple weeks ago that he said, well, maybe Joplin will play week 10, maybe not, or if we need to be in a different bracket, maybe he won't. Now, that opens up the can of worms. Did he intentionally go in to lose that game to get into a different bracket? Now, resting regulars and whatever is one thing, and he has a right to do that. But if he had it in his mind to get out of Bridgeport's bracket and have an easier road to the Super 6, then I think that is going to upset some people, and obviously it did.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can agree with part of the strategy, but if that was the underlying thing.
I mean, you've covered high school football for a long time. I've been around a while. I mean, and I'm not meaning to.
Sure.
Yogi Kinder. We all know.
You guys are old. We get it.
Hey, that's right. We all know that Yogi Kinder has a reputation. Okay. And I've even kidded about it on here about running scores up on people and everything like that. If it's somebody else, is the state this mad, or is the state being high school football fans across the state, ready to be mad at Yogi Kinder for something? Do you think his reputation preceded him into this?
I do. One thing, and I think there's also, I think a little bit of maybe jealousy with what Mingo Central has accomplished the last couple of years. I mean, just on the surface, brand new shiny school. They've got a new uniform every week, it seems like. They win games. They score a lot of points. I mean, there's a lot of ammo there if you want to just find a reason to not like Mingo Central and decide, okay, well, those guys cheated. I don't like them. So, yeah, I don't. If it had been other schools, I think there would have certainly been some, hubbub, some ire raised about it, but the fact that it was Yogi Kinder and Mingo Central, I think, kind of poured some gas on that fire that wouldn't have been there otherwise.
Yeah, I agree.
One more thing, talk about circumventing the rules, or possibly, it brought to mind some other things, not in football, but a few years ago when we first went to coaches' seating processes, I remember a couple instances where coaches were seating teams that were like 18-4 in their section. Of course, they could vote for their own teams, but they're voting them way down to enhance their position. And then, you've got when guys get thrown out of a game. Remember O.J. Mayo getting thrown out of a game, MSAC championship. Usually a 2-game suspension. But they took it to court, get a temporary restraining order. They had a big game on ESPN against the California team, I think at Cameron Indoor Stadium. And so they put that temporary restraining order so he could play in those games, because that's when they had their dream team, that was all set up for that. Then of course when those games are over, then he paid his two-game suspension.
Sits out against.
So if you want to talk about circumventing the rules, it's been going on in different ways, and this certainly isn't the first instance.
It brings to mind. I mean, especially in girls, sometimes in boys, in single A. The state tournament brackets, when they first went to seeding, how many times it just so magically worked out that all one side of the bracket was all public schools? I mean, come on.
Enough about the Mingo Central situation. Let's get into the games that we're looking at here in Class AA. Of course, we read through the field just a little bit ago. Just similar to AAA, maybe not quite as many that really jump off the page at you, but a couple that I'm looking at here. That 8-9 game, Robert C. Byrd at Chapmanville. Everything I've heard from people in North Central part of the state is, Byrd is really, really good. Got a great running back. A lot of people are kind of expecting them to come down on Saturday afternoon and maybe put one on Chapmanville. I'm kind of leaning that way too. Is that the sense you guys are getting, that Bird's hot, right time, good situation for them right now?
Chapmanville's lost. It was 7-0 at one point. They come into the playoffs 7-3. Luckily for them, they had last week off to kind of retool a little bit. They've been giving up a lot of points all season, even in the games they won, 38-35 with Hoover, and that's one of the lower scores. So, they're going to give up some points. It's a question of whether they can score enough to stay with them.
Another one that jumps out at me, and is a game you've kind of been trumpeting since the announcements came out. Number 15 Weir at number 2 Bluefield. Weir is not your typical number 15 seed. You gonna get into that a little bit because they've got quite the resume for being the second lowest seed in the field.
I'm going to tell you right now, I'll look at that half of the bracket and I'll let you guys agree or not. There's a scenario, and it's not that far out there, where I could see number 15 Weir versus number 11 Herbert Hoover in a semifinal. I think you look at the losses Weir has by 1 to Magnolia, I think by 7 to Brook,
in which they led in the final minute against Brook.
And I know I've seen Magnolia, and I know how you've seen Magnolia.
Yeah.
That's a good football team.
Yep.
And yeah, I think, man, the one thing that Bluefield has going for it, I think, is it lost as a 3 seed last year to Ravenswood in the first round. That's going to be fresh on their memory, I think. That to me, of all the games there, that might be the best first round game to me in any class. I think that's going to be a really good game.
And not to stay on Mingo Central, but they're the number 7 seed. They host number 10 Summers County. A lot of the perception was that, whatever Mingo Central did or didn't do, they did to get out of Bridgeport's side of the bracket. It's not like Bridgeport is the only good team in Class AA. Now, they have been clearly the number 1 team, but Bluefield's pretty good. Kaiser's pretty good. Fairmont Senior's pretty good. Robert C. Bird's pretty good. Tulsa's pretty good. I mean, I don't think that really holds. If that's what they were trying to do, again, I don't know if they were or not, but it seems kind of foolhardy because there's a lot of potential places to stub your toe in this field. You're covering that Herbert Hoover James Monroe game, and you're excited for it. What's going on with you? How you feeling about this game coming up?
The first thing is that I've never covered a game with James Monroe, so I get to go. I mean,
check another one off the list,
there's not many places left really that I'm gonna get to. So that's cool to me. James Monroe is running the spread now, which blows my mind because in their early years they kind of just basically ran an I, under Don Jackson. Then when Taylor Robertson was there and they made it through the Super 6, they were essentially running a single wing. And now they've gone away and been out of the playoff picture for a few years. They haven't been there since '09. They come back and they're running the spread. So they're throwing the ball a good bit more than they're running it. So, and I just like this matchup. I think Hoover, the one time I saw Hoover was against Mingo Central, just like 2 weeks ago. And I think Mingo Central is, we just talked about it, when they're playing, maybe the number 2 team in AA, okay? I think this is a game that Hoover can go on the road and win. And I think that it's something about James Monroe that I'm really interested to see how good or not they are, being away, as I said, for so long. Rick, you saw them against Bluefield, and I don't know how much of a gauge that is when we're comparing it to going up against Hoover.
Yeah, it was 55-6, Bluefield won, but for the longest time it was a competitive game. James Monroe twice in the first half got the ball inside the 10, first down, and missed 2 short field goals. Third quarter, first time they got the ball, get down inside the 10, get no points. So, and then things kind of snowballed after that, and Bluefield has such great speed that eventually they broke a few of them. But 55-6 wasn't indicative of how close the game was. Especially if they had put points on the board, that would have changed the strategy for both teams going down the rest of the way.
I just think this is a good matchup Friday night. Plus, it's a Friday night game. Get to make a nice drive on Friday afternoon. Be good.
That whole part of the bracket, I mean, we talked a little bit about Chapmanville stumbling in here. I feel like Tulsa is too. They lost to, a 4-16 Kentucky.
Boyd County, yes.
Haven't been real impressive lately. Yeah. And that's, man, I saw this bracket and saw the draw for Hoover down there, and it's set up for them.
I think that bottom half
winnable games for them.
Pretty wide open. But anyway, we'll get into Class A here and get things moving along. The number 16 seed, Van, takes on number 1 Magnolia on Saturday. Number 9 Pocahontas County versus number 8 Williamstown. Excuse me, it's also a Saturday game. A lot of Saturday games in Class A, if you haven't noticed over the years. Number 13 in Class A, Meadow Bridge versus number 4 Moorfield. Of course, that one's on Friday. Rematch from a game, I believe it was an overtime game just a few weeks ago. Number 12 Tug Valley versus number 5 Man, also on Friday. The bottom half of the Class A bracket, number 15 Bishop Donahue takes on number 2 East Hardy on Saturday. Pendleton County is the 10 seed. They take on Wheeling Central, the 7 seed. That's also a Saturday game. Number 14 Valley Wetzel is at number 3 Harrison County on Friday, and number 11 St. Mary's goes to number 6 Buffalo, also a Friday game. There's some intrigue here, I think, just because you've got, Wheeling Central's a seven seed, and you could see a situation where Wheeling Central might be the favorite in the bottom half of the bracket as a 7 seed. South Harrison's a 3 seed, and that's as high as they've been in a long time. Buffalo's undefeated and is a 6 seed and gets to host the defending state runner-up in St. Mary's, perennial Class A power. And that's just the bottom half of the bracket. The top half we mentioned, you've got that rematch of Tug Valley and Man. Meadowbridge Moorfield could end up being a really good game. Pocahontas County's been as hot as anybody in Class A the last month or so. They've got to go on the road for Williamstown. Of course, Pocahontas County I think they just thumped Man a couple weeks ago. Kind of got on my radar at least after that one. And there might not be a whole lot of intrigue with Van and Magnolia, but Van in a playoff game is good to see for them. Guys, what's jumping out at you in Class A? What are you looking forward to? What should the watchers and readers and listeners of this maybe have on their radar with Class A playoffs get going?
Once again, what you just said, I like that 8-9 game between Pocahontas County and Williamstown. Every time I think Williamstown might have a challenge in the last couple of weeks, Braxton, Roan, they've just put the pedal to the floor and blew them both out. But at the same time, you got Pocahontas County coming in riding high. Long trip. That didn't seem to affect Pocahontas County when they went to Cameron last week and put almost 70 points on the board. I think Pocahontas County might be a dark horse to, they play Magnolia in this next round. Who knows? Maybe that's the reason why Magnolia won't win it. I don't know. But looking at this, the Tug Man game, which went to overtime 2 weeks ago, is a 14-12 final. South Harrison at number 3. I know that matchup with Valley Wetzel is a closer of a regional kind of thing than it might seem to a lot of people. Valley isn't all that far away from Shinston in Lincoln County. They're pretty close. That's St. Mary's Buffalo game though, man. I don't know. I wish I'd seen Buffalo this year. I have seen St. Mary's. That's a coin flip. I mean, I know St. Mary's has some really good skilled players. I don't know if it has the size to match up with what Buffalo has up front.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of feeling sorry for Buffalo to go undefeated and to get draw a team that was in the Super 6 last year. But I don't know. I've seen Buffalo a couple times this year, and they keep surprising me. They went up Tug Valley, a team that kind of handled them in the playoffs last year, and they handled Tug Valley this year. And then Wahama has had their number for several years in a row, and they put 66 on the board against them. And every time I see them, they just look a little bit better. It looks like they're figuring it out. Quarterbacks run a little more, Ethan Burgess. You don't just have Dylan Lucas. You got a 6'4", 230-pound tight end with good hands, Owen Tillis. I think I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss him against St. Mary's. I think a one-touchdown game either way.
Gotcha.
I want to go back to Man Tug Valley for a second. I wrote a little bit about that. It'll be in the paper tomorrow. This is the 4th time they played in 2 years. The previous 3 games were 6 points or less. This is always a good game, and I was kind of talking to Rick before we started filming here. That's kind of an important game for that area, where Class A schools are kind of falling off to consolidation.
Yeah.
And I talked to man coach Harvey Arms up there, and he was talking about how healthy of a rivalry this is and how refreshing it is to see one where they don't have to travel across the state to play it. So anytime those two get together, obviously it's going to be a good game, and that whole region down there will be ready for that one. That's a pretty good matchup there.
All right, so that wraps up with the 3 classes, the 8 games in each class. What we're going to do now, I think we've all kind of agreed as things have gotten to this point that the 3 number 1 seeds, Cabell Midland in AAA, Bridgeport in AA, and Magnolia in Class A, this isn't one of those years where there's a lot of teams that you think, oh, they've got a shot. Those 3 teams are fairly well established as the favorites at this point. Well, I'm going to have each of you guys do. You're each going to take a class. Tell us why Cabell Midland, Bridgeport, or Magnolia will not win a state championship this year. We'll start with Class AAA.
Well, I think they will, but for devil's advocate part, for devil's advocate, I'll tell you this: out of the 3 number 1 seeds, I think they had the worst draw. I mean, you look at the teams in the top half of this bracket. Morgantown's there, Brooks there, Capital's there, Martinsburg's there. We talked about Xavier Lawson a little bit. If that's the matchup. And it seems to me, you guys can agree or disagree, I could see a larger group of teams in AAA that could possibly win this thing than in either of the other 2 classes. I think there's 4 or 5 teams that if you told me they would win it, I wouldn't be shocked. You know, South Charleston, Wheeling Park, Capital, Martinsburg. I mean, as hot as Brook is even, you know, I mean, they beat Wheeling Park, so that's...
On the island, that game was a road game.
Which I've been led to believe is impossible, but apparently that did happen. So, and also, you got to think, Cabell Midland, I think we kind of lose sight because of the GW blowout. They were vulnerable early. We talked a little bit. Capital was in a great spot to win that game. South Charleston had a lead with 3 minutes to go and then had the ball inside the 20-yard line as the game expired. So it's not like they played like this dominant. They haven't done what Bridgeport's done. Let's put it that way. Bridgeport's just clocked people all year. Midland early in the year showed a little bit of vulnerability, and it's playoff time. It only takes once.
Rick, you're going to do Class AA for us? Why won't Bridgeport win?
Bridgeport. Well, what's the saying, if those who don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it? I was looking back, year 2001. Bridgeport had won AA title in 2000, 14-0. 13-0 coming into the Super 6 in 2001, blowing people out. I think we had 8 guys picking games on our staff at that time. All 8 of them picked Bridgeport going into the 2001 title game. They were a machine. They were rolling over people, kind of much like they're doing now. The final score was Polka 21, Bridgeport 7. None of us saw that coming. I think Bob Lindley pulled a couple trick plays out of his hat. I still think about that game, and I still wonder how did it happen. I mean, that hit everybody right between the eyes. So I think you learn from that. Here, similar situation. Bridgeport, other than that tie with Wheeling Park, which really wasn't a game, haven't been challenged too much this year. But they gave some of the running backs or some of the teams they're going to face down the line. Juwan Jones-Wright, I guess, got 173 yards against them in the regular season. That could be a Game 2 matchup. Bluefield has definite speed in its backfield. A couple thousand-yard rushers. They could pose some problems here. Mingo Central, if everybody's healthy, could leap out of that bracket. I don't think, just when you think a team is invincible, Patriots 16-0 2 years ago in the Super Bowl, too much praise. I think you can still see something happen here, not necessarily hand it to them right now.
I took before, just to add one point to yours if I can, Kaiser healthy. When Bridgeport beat them, they were not healthy. They were missing Roadheaver and Hours got hurt on the first possession of the game. And Kaiser, I've seen Bridgeport 3 times, by far did the best job defensively against Bridgeport. That's a dangerous semifinal game.
Derek, you want to take Class A?
Absolutely. Why Magnolia won't win? Speaking as a person who remembers the 81 game against Sarita Canova, in which they came in as the number 1 seed and lost, as the 92 title game against Buffalo Wayne, came in as the number 1 seed and ranked nationally by the USA Today and lost. This is what Magnolia does. Magnolia's made it to the Super 6 a good bit of times and fallen short. They only have 2 state titles, and they're the 2nd winningest program in the state in all history behind Parkersburg. No, 3rd. Sorry, Morgantown passed them. As far as X's and O's of it, like Midland, I think their half of the bracket is much more challenging. As I just mentioned, they get the winner of Pocahontas County and Williamstown. All right. Either way, I think that's a challenge for them. And then on down the line, I'm going to say Moorfield. I'm going to pick Moorfield out of that other bracket, and with Will Schoonover and their ability to just, if there's anybody in Class A that knows how to get it done and get the wheeling, it's Moorfield. That's not. It's not by any stretch an easy, path to the title game for Magnolia. Even, a couple years ago when Wahama won it, they went through Magnolia to do it, and Magnolia was the higher seed. Look, I think Magnolia often falls victim to being the biggest fish in a very small pond. Okay, right around it is Peyton City, Valley, 100. Right across the river is River Local, and New Martinsville is the hub of this little area. And there's a mindset there, and I know there because I grew up there. That is a superior mindset, and sometimes when you have to rise above, and you have that, you think you've already done something that you haven't. Okay, and that ends up costing them. As far as, like I said, X's and O's, they're when I saw them, they were vulnerable to the pass. So if they get somebody against them that can throw the ball against them, that could hurt them. Other than that, they're really good against the run and have really good balance on offense. But I do think they're vulnerable. They haven't won anything yet.
All right, last thing we'll do. I'm not going to make you guys pick state champions, but I do want to know who your Super 6 teams are going to be in each class, and we'll just go Class A and go around the table, and Double A, and then Single A. Rick, we'll start with you. Who do you have as the final 2 teams in the Class Triple A field this year?
Triple A, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to harken back to a 1991 rematch. I'm going to go with Capitol and Wheeling Park.
Okay.
Okay. Cabell Midland, Wheeling Park.
I'm going with Cabell Midland and South Charleston out of the bottom half of the bracket.
I got Cabell, Midland, and Park.
All right. What about Class Double A, Rick?
As much as I'd like to say Bridgeport and Mingo Central and the ramifications that would have, I think I'm going to go with Bridgeport and Bluefield. I've seen Bluefield. I think at their best, that would be the best challenge.
If you want to say it, I'll say it. Bridgeport, Mingo Central.
That's where I'm going too. Yeah.
But I do want to throw an outlier. Weir really scares me to death. They can make it there, I think, but I can't do it.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Bridgeport and Mingo Central in Double A, but anybody out of that bottom half of the Double A bracket, I wouldn't be incredibly shocked to see. But I'm going with Mingo Central.
I'm going with Bridgeport and Tulsa because I respect Southern football. No, actually, because I've got them beating Weir in the semis, and I think Weir just they would have to go to Bluefield, then go to Mingo Central, then go to Tulsa. I think that's just too much, and I think Tulsa makes it to Weir.
All right, real quick, Class A.
Class A, I don't want you guys to call me a homer because I too grew up in the Ohio Valley, but I'm going to go with Magnolia and Wheeling Central.
Looks good to me. I agree.
I'm going to go with Magnolia and Buffalo.
Oh!
Shots fired.
All right, man. That'd be cool, though.
Yeah.
I'm going Magnolia Central. I mean,
I think East Hardy's dangerous down there, too.
That's a good team. All right. Of course, you can always find everything we do online at wvhuddle.com. You can follow us on Twitter at wvhuddle. We're on Facebook. If you want anything besides high school sports, at Gazmail Sports on Twitter, Gazette Mail or wvgazettemail.com/sports. He's Gazmail DT on Twitter. I'm Tom Bragg Sports. R. Pritt, Rick Ryan, WV. And I think that about does it. Everybody have fun out the first week of the playoffs. We'll see what happens. We'll do this again next week. Thanks for watching.